I've been reading through some stories here and never thought I'd be writing one myself. But here I am. I'm a 38M married to my wife, let's call her S, who's 35F. We've been together for 15 years and married for 10. We have 2 kids, a boy 7 and a girl 5. I always thought we had a solid marriage, with the usual ups and downs, but nothing that made me think our relationship was in trouble. Everything started to unravel about a month ago. I was supposed to be out of town for a work conference, but decided to come home early and surprise S with a date night. When I got home, I noticed a car in the driveway that I didn't recognize. My gut immediately told me something was off, but I tried to brush it off as paranoia. I went inside quietly, thinking I'd catch her off guard and surprise her. The surprise was on me. I heard noises coming from our bedroom, and when I opened the door, I found S in bed with another man, someone I didn't recognize. They both looked shocked, and I just stood there, unable to process what I was seeing. I didn't say anything. I just walked out, got into my car, and drove to a friend's house. I stayed there for a few hours trying to figure out what to do. S called me multiple times, but I didn't pick up. When I finally returned home, she was waiting for me in the living room, crying and apologizing. She said it was a mistake and begged for forgiveness. I wanted to believe her, but something didn't sit right with me. I started doing some digging and found out that this affair had been going on for over 2 years. Not only that, but she had been involved with multiple men, some of whom were people we knew, like neighbors and even one of my co-workers. I confronted S with the evidence, and she broke down, admitting to everything. She said she felt neglected and unappreciated, and that the attention from these other men made her feel wanted and desirable. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I always thought I was a good husband, a good father, and that our life was happy. Clearly, I was wrong. I'm at a loss. I don't know what to do. We've built a life together, and we have kids who need us both. Part of me wants to try to work things out for the sake of the kids, but another part of me is filled with anger and betrayal. How can I ever trust her again? I haven't told anyone about this yet, not even our families. I feel embarrassed and ashamed. I know I need to make a decision, but I don't know what the right one is. Do I try to save our marriage for the kids' sake, or do I cut my losses and move on? If anyone has been through something similar or has any advice, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks for reading. I ended up renting a small apartment on the other side of town. It was nothing fancy, just a place to crash while I figured out my next steps. The first few nights there were a blur. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. S kept trying to reach out, sending me messages and voicemails, pleading with me to come back home. She kept saying she was sorry, that she loved me, and that we could work things out. I didn't know what to believe anymore. How could someone who claimed to love me betray me like that for so long? The worst part was trying to keep it together for the kids. They didn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home, why Mommy was crying all the time. I didn't want to drag them into this mess, but it was unavoidable. Every time I saw their faces, I was reminded of what I had to protect, and it tore me up inside. After a week of living like this, I decided it was time to start telling people the truth. I couldn't carry the burden alone anymore. I called up my parents first. My mom cried and my dad was furious. They wanted me to move back home, but I needed space to think. Next, I told my closest friends. They were shocked, of course, but supportive. Everyone had the same question: what are you going to do? I still didn't have an answer, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let S get away with this without facing any consequences. I was filled with a mixture of rage and a sense of justice. She had destroyed our marriage, and everyone needed to know the truth about what she had done. I started with her family. Her parents were devastated. They couldn't believe their daughter could do something like this. They begged me to reconsider leaving her, to give her another chance. It was painful to see them suffer, but they needed to know what kind of person their daughter had become. Next, I told our mutual friends. The news spread like wildfire. People were texting and calling me nonstop, offering their sympathies and sharing their own horror stories about infidelity. It felt good to have people on my side, but it didn't make the pain go away. Then I decided to take it a step further. I contacted her workplace. I knew it was extreme, but I was past caring. I felt like she needed to face the full extent of her actions. I sent an anonymous email to her boss and a few of her coworkers, detailing what she had done. Within a day, the entire office knew about her affair. The fallout was immediate. She was called into a meeting and reprimanded for her behavior. I heard later that she had been put on probation, with a strong recommendation to seek counseling if she wanted to keep her job. The satisfaction of knowing she was finally facing some consequences was short-lived. The kids were still caught in the middle of this mess. I missed them terribly and hated that they were going through this. Every time I picked them up for my weekends, they would ask when I was coming home. It broke my heart every single time. Meanwhile, S continued to try and win me back. She wrote me letters, sent me gifts, even showed up at my apartment a few times. Each time I turned her away. I couldn't trust her, and I didn't see how I ever could again. The woman I married was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. One night, after a particularly heavy drinking session, I decided to go back to the house and confront her again. I was filled with liquid courage and a burning need for answers. When I got there, she was sitting on the couch, looking through old photo albums. She looked up, surprised to see me. "Why, S? Why did you do it?" I demanded, slurring my words. She started crying, saying she didn't know, that she was just looking for something she couldn't find in our marriage. I wanted to believe her, but it all sounded like excuses to me. We argued for hours, rehashing the same points over and over again, until we were both exhausted. In the days that followed, I realized I couldn't keep living this way. The drinking, the anger, the constant fighting, it wasn't healthy for me or the kids. I needed to take control of my life again, to find a way forward. I decided to see a therapist, someone who could help me sort through my feelings and make sense of everything. The therapist helped me see that my anger was valid, but it was also consuming me. She encouraged me to find ways to move forward, whether that meant trying to rebuild my marriage or moving on without S. It was a long and painful process, but I slowly began to see a glimmer of hope. I started focusing on myself, my health, and my kids. I cut back on the drinking, joined a support group for people going through similar situations, and started spending more quality time with my children. I wanted to be the best dad I could be, despite everything that had happened. One day, while at a support group meeting, I met someone who changed everything. Her name was Emily, and she had been through a similar experience. Her husband had cheated on her, and she was struggling to put the pieces of her life back together. We connected immediately, sharing our stories and offering each other support. Emily and I started seeing each other outside of the meetings, and before long, our friendship turned into something more. She was a breath of fresh air, someone who understood my pain and helped me see that there was still hope for happiness. For the first time in months, I started to feel like myself again. But the journey was far from over. S found out about Emily and was furious. She accused me of moving on too quickly, of not giving our marriage a fair chance. It led to more fights and more heartache, but I stood my ground. I knew I deserved to be happy, and Emily made me happy. As I write this, I'm still navigating this complicated mess. S and I are in the process of finalizing our divorce, and it's been a roller coaster of emotions. The kids are adjusting, slowly but surely, and I'm doing my best to be there for them every step of the way. Emily has been a constant source of support, and I don't know where I'd be without her. We're taking things slow, but I'm hopeful for the future. I know there will be more challenges ahead, but I'm ready to face them. I'm back with another update. Things have escalated quite a bit since my last post, and I'm really struggling with what to do next. Your support has been invaluable, so I'm hoping you can help me navigate this latest chapter in my life. After deciding to move forward with the divorce, I officially filed the papers. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I knew it was necessary. I couldn't continue living a lie, and I needed to start the process of moving on for my sake and for my kids. I had my lawyer draw up everything, and I served S the papers at home. She was devastated, or at least she acted like she was. She begged me to reconsider, to give her another chance to prove she could change. But I was done. Too much had happened, and there was no going back. I packed up more of my things and headed back to my apartment, determined to see this through. A few days after filing, I got an unexpected visit. S's parents showed up at my apartment, looking grim. They're good people, and we've always gotten along well. They were like second parents to me, so seeing them was hard. They asked if they could come in and talk, and I reluctantly agreed. Once inside, they got straight to the point. They wanted me to come back home and work things out with S. They said she was a wreck, that she couldn't eat or sleep, and that she was truly sorry for everything she had done. They pleaded with me to think about the kids, to give our marriage another shot for their sake. I was torn. On one hand, I still loved S despite everything, and I didn't want to see her suffer. On the other hand, I couldn't ignore the betrayal and the damage it had caused. I told her parents that I appreciated their concern, but I needed time and space to figure things out. They left looking disappointed, but they promised to support whatever decision I made. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what they had said. I started questioning my decision again, wondering if I was making the right choice. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe I should give her another chance, if not for us, then for the kids. I decided to sleep on it and see how I felt in the morning. The next day, I went to pick up the kids for the weekend. S looked awful, like she hadn't slept in days. She tried to talk to me again, but I brushed her off, focusing on getting the kids ready to leave. Just as we were about to walk out the door, she grabbed my arm and pulled me back inside. "We need to talk now," she said, her voice shaking. "I don't have anything to say to you, S. I'm just here for the kids," I replied, trying to keep my cool. She started crying, begging me to stay and talk things out. The kids were confused and scared, and I didn't want them to see us fighting. I told them to wait in the car and turned back to S. "What do you want from me, S? I've made my decision," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just want a chance to make things right. Please, for the sake of our family," she pleaded. I felt a wave of anger and frustration wash over me. "You had your chance and you blew it. I can't trust you anymore. I don't see how we can ever go back to the way things were." At that moment, something in her snapped. She lunged at me, screaming and hitting me. I was caught off guard and stumbled back, trying to protect myself. She hit me hard in the eye, then in the ear, and I fell to the floor, dazed and in pain. The kids heard the commotion and ran back inside, screaming for us to stop. I managed to get up and pull them away, my vision blurry and my head pounding. I told them to get back in the car, and I turned to S, who was now crying and apologizing. "I can't do this anymore, S. You need help," I said, trying to keep my voice calm despite the pain. "I'm taking the kids, and I don't know when I'll be back." I got the kids into the car and drove to my parents' house. My mom took one look at me and gasped, rushing to get some ice for my eye. My dad was furious when he heard what had happened. He wanted to go over and confront S, but I told him it wouldn't solve anything. We needed to focus on the kids and figuring out the next steps. Over the next few days, I spoke with my lawyer about the incident. He advised me to file for a restraining order and to document everything. He also suggested getting a therapist for the kids to help them process what was happening. It was all so overwhelming, but I knew I had to stay strong for their sake. Meanwhile, S's parents reached out again, this time to apologize for their daughter's behavior. They said they had no idea things had gotten so bad and promised to support me and the kids however they could. It was a small comfort in the midst of all the chaos. I started seeing a therapist myself, trying to make sense of everything and figure out how to move forward. The therapist helped me understand that I wasn't to blame for S's actions and that I needed to focus on my own healing and well-being. One day, while I was at a therapy session, my therapist suggested that I try to find a support group for people going through similar experiences. She said it could be helpful to connect with others who understood what I was going through. I was hesitant at first, but I decided to give it a try. The first meeting was nerve-wracking. I didn't know what to expect, and I was afraid of being judged. But as soon as I walked in, I was welcomed with open arms. People shared their stories, and I realized I wasn't alone. There were others who had been through similar, if not worse, situations, and they were still standing. One person's story stood out to me. A man named Mike shared how he had discovered his wife's infidelity while he was battling a terminal illness. He talked about the betrayal, the anger, and the heartbreak, but he also talked about finding peace and moving forward. His strength and resilience were inspiring, and I found myself drawn to his story. After the meeting, I approached Mike and thanked him for sharing. We started talking, and he offered to meet up for coffee sometime to talk more. Over the next few weeks, we became friends. He was a source of strength and wisdom, helping me navigate the complicated emotions I was dealing with. Through my friendship with Mike and my therapy sessions, I started to see a path forward. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to rebuild my life and create a better future for myself and my kids. S continued to reach out, but I kept my distance. I needed to focus on my own healing and on being the best father I could be. The kids were my top priority, and I wanted to make sure they felt loved and supported through this difficult time. One evening, I was at home with the kids when there was a knock at the door. It was Emily, the woman I had mentioned in my last update. She had heard about what had happened and wanted to check on me. We talked for a while, and she offered her support and friendship. It was comforting to have someone who understood what I was going through. As the weeks went by, Emily and I grew closer. We started spending more time together, and she quickly became a positive presence in my life. She was kind, understanding, and supportive, and she made me feel like I could get through anything. But just as things seemed to be getting better, another storm was brewing. One day, I received a call from my lawyer with some unsettling news. S had hired a new lawyer, and they were planning to fight for full custody of the kids. She was claiming that I was an unfit father, citing my drinking and the incident where she hit me as evidence. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything she had done, she was now trying to take the kids away from me. I felt a wave of panic and anger wash over me, but I knew I had to stay calm and focused. I needed to fight back and protect my children. I gathered all the evidence I could, documenting everything that had happened, from the affair to the physical altercation. I reached out to friends and family who could vouch for my character and my abilities as a father. I also continued to see my therapist and attend support group meetings, trying to stay strong and level-headed. The legal battle was exhausting and draining, but I refused to give up. I knew I had to fight for my kids no matter what. With the support of Emily, my parents, and my friends, I felt more determined than ever to see this through. And that brings me to where I am now. The court date is approaching, and I'm doing everything I can to prepare. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm ready to face it head-on. My kids are my world, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep them safe and happy. Thanks again for all your support, Reddit. Your words of encouragement and advice have been a lifeline during this incredibly tough time. I'll keep you all updated as things progress. Please keep us in your thoughts and send any advice you have my way. It's been a while since my last update. Things have continued to spiral, and I'm at a loss for what to do next. Your support has been a lifeline for me, and I need your advice more than ever. After filing for divorce and the subsequent custody battle, I thought things couldn't get worse. S's new lawyer was ruthless, and they were determined to paint me as an unfit father. The accusations were brutal, but I fought back with everything I had, gathering evidence and support from friends and family. I was determined to protect my kids and provide a stable environment for them. One evening, I received a call from S. Her voice was calm, almost too calm, as she asked if we could meet to discuss everything face to face. She said she wanted to resolve things amicably for the sake of the kids. I was skeptical, but I agreed, hoping against hope that we could find some common ground. I arrived at our former home, now feeling like an alien place to me. S greeted me at the door, looking composed and almost serene. We sat in the living room, and for a few moments, it seemed like we might actually have a productive conversation, but it didn't take long for old wounds to reopen. "I don't understand why you're doing this," she started, her voice tinged with frustration. "We could have worked things out. Why did you have to go and file for divorce?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "S, you know why. You broke my trust in the worst possible way. There's no going back from that." She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I made a mistake, but it doesn't mean we have to destroy our family. Think about the kids." "I am thinking about the kids," I snapped, unable to contain my anger. "That's why I'm fighting for custody. They deserve to be in a stable, loving environment, and right now that's not with you." The conversation quickly deteriorated from there. Voices were raised, accusations were hurled, and all the old anger and resentment came flooding back. In a fit of frustration, I slammed my fist into the wall several times, leaving dents in the drywall. I was shaking with rage, but S didn't flinch. Instead, she seemed eerily calm. Suddenly, she stood up and walked over to the wall I had just punched. Before I could react, she began hitting her head and shoulders against the wall with alarming force. I was stunned, unable to comprehend what she was doing. "S, stop! What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, rushing over to try and stop her. But she pushed me away, continuing to harm herself. It was then that I realized what was happening. She was trying to make it look like I had attacked her. Panicked, I backed away, my mind racing. I knew I couldn't stay there. If she called the police and accused me of assault, my chances of winning custody would be ruined. I had to get out of there. I ran out of the house, jumped into my car, and sped away. My heart was pounding, and my mind was a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. How could she stoop so low? What kind of person had she become? When I got back to my apartment, I called my lawyer and told him what had happened. He advised me to document everything and to avoid any further contact with S unless it was through legal channels. I felt trapped, helpless, and terrified of what she might do next. Over the next few days, I was on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Sure enough, S filed a police report, accusing me of assault. I was questioned by the police, but thankfully, there was no evidence to support her claims. Still, the incident cast a dark shadow over the custody battle, and I knew it was far from over. As if things weren't complicated enough, I started noticing strange things happening around my apartment. At first, it was small things. Items moved or misplaced, doors left ajar that I was sure I had closed. I chalked it up to stress and my own forgetfulness. But then I started receiving anonymous texts and calls, alluding to details about my life that only someone close to me would know. One night, while I was at home with the kids, I heard a noise outside. I looked out the window and saw a figure lurking near my car. I grabbed my phone and called the police, but by the time they arrived, the person was gone. It left me feeling paranoid and vulnerable. Who was stalking me, and why? Desperate for answers, I reached out to Mike, the friend I had met at the support group. He had become a trusted confidant, and I needed someone to talk to. We met for coffee, and I told him everything that had been happening. Mike listened carefully, his expression growing more concerned as I spoke. "It sounds like someone is trying to intimidate you," he said. "You need to be careful, and you should consider getting some security measures in place." I nodded, knowing he was right. I couldn't take any chances, not with the kids' safety at stake. I installed security cameras around my apartment and changed the locks on the doors. I also made sure to document every strange occurrence, keeping a detailed record for my lawyer. Despite these precautions, the situation continued to escalate. One evening, I received a call from Emily, who had become a significant part of my life. She sounded frantic, saying that someone had broken into her apartment and trashed the place. I rushed over to find her apartment in shambles, furniture overturned, and personal items destroyed. Emily was shaken, but unharmed. We called the police, who took a report and promised to investigate. As we waited for them to finish, Emily turned to me, her eyes filled with fear. "Do you think this has something to do with S?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted, feeling a knot of dread in my stomach. "But it's starting to feel like someone is trying to send a message." The police couldn't find any immediate leads, but they advised us to be vigilant and report any further incidents. I felt a growing sense of unease, wondering how far S or whoever was behind this was willing to go. In the midst of all this chaos, the custody battle continued. My lawyer and I were building a strong case, but the stress was taking its toll. I was constantly worried about the kids and the possibility of losing them. My nights were filled with restless sleep and nightmares of being separated from them. One day, while picking up the kids from school, I noticed a familiar car parked nearby. It was the same car I had seen outside my apartment on several occasions. My heart raced as I realized someone was watching us. Determined to confront whoever was behind this, I approached the car. As I got closer, the driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. It was Baldy, the same guy S had cheated with. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, my fists clenched at my sides. Baldy smirked, leaning casually against his car. "Just keeping an eye on things, making sure you're not causing any trouble." "Get the hell out of here," I growled, my anger boiling over. "Stay away from me and my kids." He raised his hands in mock surrender. "Relax, buddy. I'm just here to deliver a message. S wants to talk to you. She thinks you two need to clear the air." I didn't trust a word he said. "Tell her I'm not interested, and if I see you around here again, I'll call the police." Baldy shrugged, getting back into his car. "Suit yourself, but remember, she's not going to give up that easily." As he drove away, I felt a mix of rage and fear. I knew S was behind this, using Baldy to try and intimidate me, but I wasn't going to let them win. I had to stay strong for my kids and for myself. That evening, I sat down with Emily to discuss what had happened. She was supportive as always, but I could see the worry in her eyes. We both knew this wasn't going to end easily. In the days that followed, I took extra precautions. I changed my routine, varied my routes, and made sure the kids were never alone. I even hired a private investigator to keep an eye on things and gather any evidence that could help my case. Despite everything, I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy for the kids. We spent quality time together, went on outings, and I did my best to shield them from the turmoil. But it was hard to keep up the facade when every day felt like a battle. One night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat on the couch, exhausted and overwhelmed. Emily sat beside me, holding my hand. "We'll get through this," she said softly. "You're doing everything you can." It's been a whirlwind since my last update. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, life threw me another curveball. I'm here to share what's been going on and to ask for your advice once again. After the last confrontation with S and the ongoing custody battle, things took another unexpected turn. S quit her job. From what I gathered, the pressure from her coworkers, the gossip, and the fallout from everything I had exposed were too much for her to handle. She couldn't face them every day, knowing they all knew about her affairs. While a part of me felt sorry for her, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. It was a small victory in this mess, seeing her face some consequences for her actions. But of course, nothing is ever that simple. S had apparently spent all her savings on hiring the best lawyer she could find. Every piece of evidence I presented was challenged aggressively. Her legal team was relentless, picking apart my claims and casting doubt on everything I said. It was exhausting and disheartening, but I knew I had to keep fighting for the sake of my kids. In the midst of all this, S's parents continued to reach out. They were desperate to see us reconcile, convinced that if we just sat down and talked things out, we could find a way back to each other. I didn't believe it for a second, but out of respect for them and for the years we had been a part of each other's lives, I agreed to go to dinner at their house. Maybe it was a small part of me hoping for some kind of resolution, or maybe I just wanted to show that I was willing to try everything before giving up completely. The dinner started off awkwardly. S and I barely spoke to each other, and her parents were trying too hard to make small talk. The tension in the air was palpable. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, S's dad, trying to lighten the mood, made a comment that was meant to be harmless, but ended up igniting a firestorm. "Well, our daughter has always been a bit of a free spirit," he said with a chuckle. "She likes to go out and have fun." "I'm sorry about that," S snapped. She stood up, yelling at her dad to stop meddling in our relationship. The room fell silent for a moment, before it erupted into chaos. S's mom was trying to calm her down. Her dad was apologizing profusely, and I was just sitting there, stunned by the outburst. I had hoped for a civil dinner, but it had turned into another shouting match. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up and told them I was leaving. I thanked her parents for trying, but made it clear that this wasn't going to work. As I walked out the door, I could hear S still yelling, now directing her anger at her parents for ruining everything. It was a mess, and I felt a mix of sadness and relief as I drove away. Back at my apartment, I tried to focus on the custody battle and my own healing. I spent as much time as I could with the kids, making sure they felt loved and secure. Emily was a constant support, and our relationship continued to grow stronger despite the chaos around us. But S wasn't done. She continued to use every tactic she could think of to undermine me. One day, I received a call from the school principal. S had filed a complaint, claiming I was an unfit father and should not be allowed to pick up the kids from school. It was another blow, and I felt my resolve weakening. How much more could I take? I spoke with my lawyer, who assured me we would fight this new accusation just like the others. He reminded me that we had the truth on our side, but I couldn't help feeling overwhelmed. The constant attacks, the legal fees, the emotional toll. It was all piling up, and I was struggling to keep my head above water. In the midst of this, something unexpected happened. Mike, the friend I had met at the support group, called me with a proposition. He had been through his own battles and had come out stronger on the other side. He suggested we start a support group specifically for men going through similar situations, dealing with infidelity, custody battles, and the emotional fallout. He believed that sharing our experiences and supporting each other could make a real difference. I was hesitant at first. My plate was already full, and I didn't know if I had the energy to take on something new. But the more we talked about it, the more it made sense. Helping others could be a way to channel my anger and frustration into something positive. It could give me a sense of purpose and remind me that I wasn't alone. We decided to give it a shot. We reached out to other men in our community who were dealing with similar issues, and before long, we had a small but dedicated group. As the weeks went by, the support group became a lifeline for me. I found strength in the stories of others and realized that my own struggles, while difficult, were not insurmountable. I started to see a path forward, not just for myself, but for my kids and even for my relationship with S. One evening, after a particularly intense support group meeting, I received a call from S's mom. She sounded upset and asked if we could meet. I agreed, curious about what she had to say. When we met, she was in tears. She apologized for everything that had happened and begged me to consider giving S another chance. She said S was getting counseling and was genuinely trying to change. I listened, feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to believe that S could change, that we could somehow salvage our family. But another part of me knew that too much damage had been done. "I appreciate what you're saying," I told her gently. "But," she nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. I just want you to know that we're here for you, whatever you decide." That conversation weighed heavily on me in the days that followed. I wanted to do the right thing, but I was torn between my loyalty to my kids and my desire for a fresh start. The support group helped, and so did my therapist, but the decision was mine to make, and it wasn't getting any easier. Then, out of the blue, I received a call from an old friend who had moved away years ago. He had heard about my situation through mutual friends and wanted to offer his support. We caught up on old times, and he told me about a job opportunity in his city. It was a chance to start fresh, away from the memories and the constant battles with S. It was tempting. The idea of a new beginning, a new environment for the kids, and a chance to leave the past behind was appealing. But it also meant uprooting their lives and leaving behind everything they knew. I was torn. I talked it over with Emily, Mike, and my therapist. They all offered their perspectives, but in the end, they emphasized that the decision had to be what was best for me and the kids. I spent sleepless nights weighing the pros and cons, trying to envision what our lives would be like in a new city. One day, while I was picking up the kids from school, my daughter asked me, "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" Her question hit me hard. I knelt down and looked into her eyes, trying to hold back my tears. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be okay. I promise." In that moment, I realized that no matter what decision I made, it had to be one that would give my kids the best chance at happiness and stability. I needed to be strong for them, to show them that we could get through this together. I'm back with another update, and this time, things have taken an even more unexpected turn. Your support has been incredible, and I'm hoping you can help me make sense of what's happening now. After the tumultuous events of the last few months, S's behavior started to change in a way I hadn't anticipated. She began experiencing severe panic attacks, or at least that's what they seemed like. These weren't just the typical panic attacks where someone feels overwhelmed and anxious. These episodes were intense and debilitating, leaving her physically ill and unable to function. I first heard about them through the kids. They mentioned that Mommy was often sick and had to lie down a lot. At first I thought it was just stress from everything going on, but then her parents called me. They were worried and said that S's health was deteriorating rapidly. They didn't go into much detail, but it was clear they were scared for her. Despite everything that had happened, a part of me still cared about S. We had a long history together, and she was the mother of my children. I decided to visit her, if only to see for myself what was going on and to make sure the kids were okay. When I arrived at her parents' house where she had been staying, I was taken aback by how different she looked. She was pale, had lost a significant amount of weight, and there was a hollow look in her eyes. She barely resembled the vibrant woman I had once loved. Her parents led me to her room, where she was lying in bed, looking frail and exhausted. "Hi, S," I said softly, not knowing how to start. She turned to look at me, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and sadness. "Hi," she replied weakly. We talked for a while, and she admitted that the stress of everything, the divorce, the custody battle, the fallout from her job, had taken a toll on her mental and physical health. She had been having frequent panic attacks, which left her unable to eat, sleep, or function normally. As much as I wanted to stay angry at her, seeing her like this stirred up old feelings of concern and care. After some time, I stepped out of the room to give her a break and to gather my thoughts. I found myself sitting on the stairs, tears streaming down my face. This wasn't the same person who had betrayed me and turned my life upside down. She looked like a broken, vulnerable shell of her former self. I didn't know how to reconcile the anger and hurt I still felt with the compassion and pity her current state evoked. While I was lost in thought, my parents arrived. They had heard about S's condition and were there to offer their support. My dad, always the practical one, sat down next to me and put a hand on my shoulder. "We need to talk," he said firmly. "About the kids, about the case, about everything." I nodded, wiping away my tears. We moved to the living room where we could talk privately. My mom, ever the nurturing type, made sure I had a cup of tea before we started the discussion. "We're going to help you financially," my dad began. "This case has dragged on long enough, and it's clear that S isn't capable of taking care of the kids right now. We need to ensure they're in a stable, loving environment, and that means you need to win this case." I was taken aback by their determination. "But what about S?" I asked. "She's not well. She needs help." My mom sighed, her eyes filled with sympathy. "We know, and we'll do what we can to make sure she gets the help she needs. But right now, the priority has to be the kids. They need stability, and S isn't in a position to provide that." It was a difficult conversation, but I knew they were right. I needed to focus on the kids and making sure they were safe and cared for. My parents' offer of financial support was a lifeline. Legal battles are expensive, and I had already spent a small fortune on lawyer fees and court costs. With their help, I could afford to hire the best experts and ensure we had a solid case. Over the next few weeks, I worked closely with my lawyer to gather all the necessary evidence and prepare for the final custody hearing. We documented everything: S's panic attacks, her inability to care for the kids, and her erratic behavior. It was a painful process, but I knew it was necessary. In the meantime, I continued to visit S occasionally, if only to check on her and to make sure the kids were okay when they were with her. Each visit was a stark reminder of how much things had changed. She was receiving treatment and therapy, but progress was slow. Her parents were doing their best to support her, but it was clear they were struggling too. One evening, after a particularly difficult visit, I sat down with Emily to talk about everything that was happening. She had been a constant source of strength and support, and I valued her perspective. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "Seeing S like that VDJJ, it's hard. But I have to think about the kids." Emily nodded, her expression understanding. "You're doing the right thing, focusing on the kids. They need you more than ever right now, and S needs help that you can't give her." Her words resonated with me. I knew she was right, but it didn't make the situation any easier. I was torn between my responsibility as a father and my lingering feelings for S. It was a delicate balance, and I was struggling to maintain it. As the final custody hearing approached, the tension was palpable. My parents were by my side, offering their support and encouragement. My lawyer was confident we had a strong case, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. What if the judge didn't see it our way? What if S managed to sway the court with her story? The day of the hearing arrived, and we made our way to the courthouse. S was there, looking more composed than I had seen her in weeks, but still fragile. Her lawyer was as aggressive as ever, challenging every piece of evidence we presented. It was a grueling process, and I could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on me. During a recess, I stepped outside to get some fresh air. As I stood there trying to collect my thoughts, Mike showed up. He had taken the day off to be there for support, and seeing him gave me a boost of confidence. "You've got this," he said, clapping me on the back. "You're doing everything you can for your kids. Just stay strong." His words were a balm to my frazzled nerves. I thanked him and headed back inside, ready to continue the fight. The hearing resumed, and we presented our final arguments. S's lawyer tried to paint me as an unfit father, bringing up my drinking and the incident where S had hurt herself. But my lawyer countered each point, showing that I had taken steps to address my issues and that I was fully capable of caring for my children. As the hearing drew to a close, the judge took a moment to review the evidence and consider our arguments. The tension in the courtroom was thick, and I could barely breathe as we waited for the decision. In the midst of all this, I couldn't help but think about S. Despite everything, she was still a part of my life, and I couldn't ignore the impact this was having on her. I hoped that whatever the outcome, she would get the help she needed and find a way to heal. This is it, the final chapter in what has been the most tumultuous period of my life. I want to thank everyone who has supported me along the way. Your advice, encouragement, and solidarity have meant more than I can express. Here's how it all concluded. After the final custody hearing, the waiting was agonizing. My parents stayed with me, trying to keep my spirits up. Emily was a constant presence, her calm demeanor a soothing balm in the chaos. The kids were with my parents, sheltered from the legal battle that was determining their future. When the court's decision finally came, I was a bundle of nerves. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me primary custody of the children. S would have supervised visitation until she could prove she was stable and capable of caring for them. It was a bittersweet victory. While I was relieved to have my kids with me, the sight of S breaking down in the courtroom was heart-wrenching. Despite everything, seeing her in so much pain stirred up complicated emotions. My parents were ecstatic, and their support was unwavering. They assured me they'd be there every step of the way, financially and emotionally. We celebrated that evening, a mix of joy and relief washing over us. But amid the celebration, there was an undercurrent of sadness for what had been lost. Emily and I took the kids to my parents' house, where we had a quiet dinner together. It was a peaceful moment, a stark contrast to the turmoil of the past months. I felt a sense of closure, knowing that my children were safe and that we could begin to heal as a family. S, meanwhile, continued to struggle. Her panic attacks were still frequent, and her parents decided to admit her to a specialized treatment facility. It was a difficult decision, but they knew it was the best way for her to get the help she needed. I visited her one last time before she went in. It was a somber meeting, both of us aware that this was the end of an era. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "For everything." I nodded, unable to find the right words. "I hope you get better, S, for the kids' sake and for your own." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of regret and gratitude. "Thank you. Take care of them." With that, we parted ways. It was a moment of closure that I needed, a final chapter in our shared story. As the weeks passed, life slowly began to return to a new normal. The kids adjusted to the new routine, and with the help of therapy, they began to process the changes in their lives. Emily moved in with us, and her presence was a stabilizing force. She was wonderful with the kids, and her support made all the difference. Mike and I continued to run the support group, which had grown significantly. Helping others navigate their own struggles gave me a sense of purpose and healing. It reminded me that despite the pain, there was hope and strength to be found in community. One day, as I was dropping the kids off at school, I ran into one of S's former coworkers. She mentioned that the workplace had changed significantly since S left, and that the atmosphere was much less tense. It was a reminder of how far we had all come since the beginning of this ordeal. In a surprising turn of events, Baldy, the man S had cheated with, contacted me. He wanted to apologize for his role in everything. At first, I was furious, but I decided to meet with him. He seemed genuinely remorseful, explaining that he had no idea the extent of the damage he had caused. He had also lost his job and was struggling to rebuild his life. "Look, I don't expect forgiveness," he said, "but I wanted to say I'm sorry. I never meant for things to go this far." I listened, feeling a mix of anger and pity. "What's done is done," I replied. "I just hope you've learned something from all this." He nodded, looking down. "I have. More than you know." That encounter was another step toward closure. It was a reminder that people can change, that they can learn and grow from their mistakes. It didn't erase the pain, but it helped me to let go of some of the anger I had been holding on to. Emily and I decided to take a trip with the kids to visit my old friend who had offered the job opportunity. It was a chance to see a new place, to explore the possibility of a fresh start. The trip was wonderful, filled with laughter and adventure. It was a glimpse of the future we could have, one filled with hope and new beginnings. Upon returning, I had a long conversation with my parents. They were supportive of whatever decision I made, whether it was to stay or to move. We discussed the pros and cons, weighing the impact on the kids and our family. In the end, I decided to take the job and make the move. It was a difficult decision, but I knew it was the right one. It was time to leave the past behind and build a new life for my family. Emily was excited about the move, and the kids, while nervous, were also looking forward to the adventure. We began the process of packing up our lives, saying goodbye to friends and family. It was bittersweet, but there was a sense of anticipation and excitement for what lay ahead. My parents promised to visit often, and we made plans to stay connected with our support group. As we settled into our new home, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. The kids adjusted to their new school, making friends and exploring their new surroundings. Emily found a job she loved, and we started to build a new community. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily turned to me and smiled. "We made it," she said softly. I nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Yeah, we did." Life wasn't perfect, and there were still challenges ahead, but we were moving forward, together. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer defined us. We had found a way to heal, to grow, and to build a new future. Thank you, Reddit, for being there for me through this journey. Your support and advice have been a guiding light in some of my darkest moments. As I close this chapter and look to the future, I carry with me the strength and resilience I've found along the way. Here's to new beginnings and the hope that comes with them.